Magi is a series that I have heard about for a long time, and I even watched a bit of the anime roughly 6 or 7 years ago, as it did catch my eye. However, I remember not finishing it due to the sheer amount of series that I did want to watch. As I was getting into anime at the time, I wanted to watch a whole lot of different series, and Magi kind of fell by the wayside. And I do kind of regret that, as I've been hearing lots of good things about Magi, as there are so many people on social media and the subreddits that actually really do praise Magi and reference their characters a whole lot. Whether it be through people giving examples of characters on YouTube videos for their favorite characters, or just specific story arcs that they want to talk about. So my curiosity for Magi just continued to peak, and I decided, you know what? I've been meaning to try and do like a blind review series similar to what Totally Not Mark has been doing with all these different manga series. Granted, some of them are complete and others are kind of still up in the air. But I did want to do a type of video in that type of format. And I honestly want to talk about Magi, and I feel like this would be a nice way for me to catalog my thoughts and opinions as I read along with this series. Now, right now I don't have a set release date for every review. I'm going to try and get these out on Thursdays or Fridays, just to start things off, or it could end up going into the weekend depending on how long these videos take to make. I'm going to try and get at least the opening parts done very early, that way I can have them released. If I'm lucky, then parts 1 and 2 will be out by the end of February or early March. And the rest should follow suit, as I will have a bit of a head start to catch up on the manga and make each video following the initial opening acts be a lot more neater in release dates and a lot more consistent, as I do want to keep up a consistent upload schedule, especially for these videos, as I know you guys are going to really want to hear my thoughts every single week when I do this. The Magi fanbase has honestly been very kind to me, as I did mention on the subreddit that I was going to try and do a blind review of this, and I've just been met with a lot of just positive vibes. I don't know if that'll change if I end up having whatever criticisms in the past, because this is going to be a review, so will I like everything? Will I dislike anything? That's what this whole video series is going to be about. So regardless, I'm excited, as I do think that this series, based on what I've read up so far, is honestly well worth the read just by the opening arc alone. And that says something, because not a lot of series have just really nice opening arcs that grab you instantly. That's very rare. But enough of my ramblings for the opening like 2-3 minutes of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you want to get updated on future videos and to help support the channel, as I do have other manga series I do want to do blind reviews of in the future once Magi is done and out of the way, which will probably take a little while. And for all we know, I might do multiple blind review series at the exact same time. I might not do that. That might confuse things. But for now, it's Magi only. And also don't forget to check out my Patreon and Ko-fi accounts if you want to get access to these videos earlier if need be and help support the channel. As for larger videos like this, I am going to be uploading them a day or two early on Patreon, and I'll be notifying you guys on my social media accounts like Twitter at The Great Weeb and on the community tab on this YouTube channel. Either way, if you want to watch these reviews earlier, then go check out my Patreon. It's going to be available for all patrons. If you don't want to do that or support me on Ko-fi account, that's perfectly fine. Just wait till the video drops on YouTube a day or two later. But anything and everything really does help, as I do want to make these videos come out a lot more consistently and have them all look as nice as they do. Now with all that out of the way, let's get into that intro so we can start this review. Now the opening arc, the dungeon arc, is honestly one of my favorite opening arcs in honestly anything as of this moment. Probably my top 10, as I do have a lot of great anime and manga that have just some nice opening arcs that don't do too much, but they grab you almost instantaneously, whether it be the nice artwork, the character introductions, or just the nice world building that isn't too like overbearing and just shatters your expectations and just puts a crap ton of info in your face right at the very start. That's honestly what I believe are just great introduction arcs, and the dungeon arc is honestly one of my favorites, as we get introduced to the main characters of Aladdin and Alibaba, and from what I remembered from the past, Morgiana, who is a very important character in this arc as well, and will be further down the road from what I've seen, is part of the main trio. I honestly enjoyed their characters and their interactions within this arc, as it does show each and every one of them in their personal growth, as well as their own goals and dreams that they want to achieve. Now, I was honestly going to just do each character one by one, but Aladdin and Alibaba, I'm giving them their own little corner. Aladdin seems like a very naive and upbeat kid with a sense of adventure, who honestly is very trusting of others and is very curious about basically everything, as it's shown that he has been pretty sheltered from the rest of the world, and also just a constant question of who Aladdin really is, because from what he has said, he's been stuck in a room for as long as he can remember with his friend Ugo, who, from what we've seen in this chapter, is a jinn inside of what is called a metal vessel. I'll get into that a little bit later, but the fact that Aladdin has essentially been sheltered from the world for a good number of years from what it looks like, I'm curious to see what kind of secrets and mysteries that Aladdin can present to us for the furtherment of the story. Alibaba, on the other hand, I instantly liked this character, as when we first introduced to him, he seemed like kind of honestly a bit of a snobbish guy who only really cared about money, and didn't care about having himself be belittled by others, or even insulted in a multitude of ways. It's even shown through a pretty interesting interaction between him, Aladdin, and a wine owner that Alibaba is transporting, as Alibaba despises everything that this man is saying, and we see a nice subtle panel showing that Alibaba is hating every second of it, as he is just lying his ass off just to make this guy happy so he can get paid. And we don't really get this whole inner struggle of Alibaba of what to do when danger occurs. When this caravan transporting everything and some people is being attacked by some desert monster, a little girl gets thrown into where that plant monster is, and it's very carnivorous. And everyone is just trying to focus on basically saving the wine, because this super rich dude is just telling them, save the wine, save the wine. And the little girl falls in as the guy bumps her into it, and Alibaba is internally thinking, someone go save her. Someone's gotta go save her, and then he decides to screw it and go down and save her himself. Alibaba seems like a character who will always end up doing the right thing, despite how much it could screw him in the end, as from what we've seen, he's the type of guy that will take on any type of belittlement or insults as long as he can further his goals or dreams, as right now it seems like he's trying to just survive and get enough money to start to fulfill his dream. But he will stand up for others, especially if it's a matter of life and death. And when we get Alibaba and Aladdin going to the dungeon, and Alibaba talking about his dream to conquer a dungeon and to someday gain his own kingdom, it's just, I like the whole big ass dream of Alibaba and just picturing himself having all sorts of money, women, nice food, and a great palace to just rule over, as his whole reason for being in the town he's in is because of the dungeon that is there, and because he wants to conquer it someday. And he's been saving up enough money so he can try and go dungeon diving. And when he meets Aladdin, sees him using his flying carpet, and even then when he ends up seeing Aladdin using Ugo, he's like, this kid can really help me out here. With his powers, I can conquer this dungeon. And what seems like a somewhat selfish desire at first, Alibaba and Aladdin end up gaining some sort of mutual respect for each other and a true friendship, especially by the end, as the two of them consistently help each other out and risk life and limb for each other, as this is essentially a friendship forged in fire. And it's just something that I really come to love, especially in this opening arc. These two make a dynamic duo, and I just can't get enough of their interactions. And Shinobu Utaka has a really nice sense of comedy throughout this arc. She presents a lot of dark moments, as well as some serious moments thematically and even story-wise, but she knows when to add in that extra bit of comedy in the lull between these moments, that it just feels refreshing to not be 100% serious 100% of the time. And I like stories like that, when you have a bit of levity between some of these darker moments. And we do get dark moments as we get into Morgiana. Morgiana, I instantly figured that based off her design that she was going to be important later down the road. And this arc really does show that, as she is essentially a slave. In this world, people who have a lot of money and influence for the majority of the time is seen they have slaves, human laborers, to just do whatever type of hard labor it is. A lot of it is just mental anguish. Morgiana shows a lot of these aspects of someone being under these types of circumstances that, to the point from a very young age, could just break your own sense of willpower. And it's seen by the one who essentially her owner, Jamil, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, Jamil, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name correctly, but he has essentially been tormenting Morgiana for years on end since she was a young child. And throughout this arc, we see that Morgiana does have a will of her own and her own thoughts, but throughout the years of torment that Jamil has placed on her, aside from the physical change, she has more invisible emotional chains that are just keeping her shackled to Jamil, as no matter what, even later down the road in this arc, when she has the moments to actually escape and defy him, despite her being physically superior to him and having a moment where Aladdin very casually just breaks her chains off after realizing that she is a slave, she just chooses to stay a slave. To an extent, it's somewhat her own free will, but it's because of all the torment and abuse over the years that she doesn't even know how to be free. Just Jamil speaking to her is enough for her to just play along and stay by his side, as this is a very real thing, as people who have experienced these types of mental and physical abuse can end up just being shackled to their abusers for the most unreasonable decisions, to the point where they won't even leave them when they have the opportunity to. And it isn't until later down the road in this arc where Aladdin and Alibaba continue to try and help her break out of those chains. It isn't until another slave that was with her that was abused even more so, to the point where he had no real pride or sense of self for the majority of his life, to set her free and bring her to her senses, with everything that's happened in this arc, for Morgiana to finally be free and to go back to her homeland. Now I should probably get into the whole dungeon aspect of this arc. The dungeon itself, I like the world building and the lore behind the dungeons and the metal vessels. The whole story behind these dungeons, that one day a single dungeon appeared, and countless people for years on end have attempted to conquer these dungeons and obtain vast treasures inside. Every dungeon has a type of lost civilization inside, along with bizarre creatures and just different types of landscapes. Until one day a single boy appeared out of this dungeon with a blue giant behind him, gathering all these treasures, as this first dungeon had been conquered. And the name of this character was Sinbad. Now, throughout social media, Sinbad has always been a character that people have continued to talk about and reference, who I had no idea who this was. And based off of Alibaba's story, Sinbad is real, and in fact he actually has his own kingdom called Sindria. And from what Alibaba's stating, and with how a lot of stuff tends to be foreshadowed at the beginning of shonen manga, we will see Sinbad and his kingdom at some point in the story. So I'm excited for that. But then countless other dungeons started popping up all over the world, and people have continued to try and conquer them. And in this story, Alibaba, thanks to Aladdin, manages to conquer a dungeon. Now, the landscape of this dungeon is honestly, while at first not too over the top, as it is mostly a cave, but once we get into the more artistic stuff, like the glowing rocks, the ancient structures, the necropolis essentially, it's all just amazing, nice artwork, and I honestly have just been taken away by how nice just the whole artistic vision Shonen Botaka has, especially for these types of backgrounds. It's just very impressive, and it helps you get immersed into the world a lot more. I want to see what the rest of these dungeons look like, and just what types of djinns are there. The end of this arc, while there are tons of different and clever traps that Alibaba and Aladdin together managed to they actually managed to crack all these things, as well as this arc alluding to Alibaba's true origins as a prince of another kingdom called Balbad, and he ended up having to leave that due to some sort of event that had occurred. And at the end of this arc, Alibaba states that he's probably going to go back to Balbad to take care of some business, which means we're going to see Balbad at some point in the story. And from what the wiki shows me, it's going to be a few arcs away, and I can't wait to learn more about Alibaba, as we were originally thought, just like Aladdin, to just be an average guy who's essentially down on his luck and trying to pay for everything. But the thing is, Alibaba went to this town to try and conquer this dungeon, potentially to try and achieve his dreams of maybe helping his home kingdom, as the whole backstory of Alibaba is something very interesting, and I'm not going to get too into it because I feel like we are going to get into this very soon according to the wiki, because the Balbat arc is like I think 2-3 arcs away after what I'm talking about, so I honestly can't wait to see what's going on. But the whole fight between Jamil and Alibaba is something that I have to say, not just choreography wise, but from a storytelling perspective, is just brilliant, because Jamil has been built up to essentially be this very imposing figure who has an iron grip on the town, and everyone's afraid of him. Even Alibaba, to an extent, is afraid of him to the point where he'll try and grovel to him to help keep himself and Aladdin safe, and perhaps they can get to the ends of the dungeon a lot quicker. As Jamil is continuing to be shown, he can be very ignorant and very spoiled. He's a very spoiled guy, he who honestly wants more. And we've seen through very brief flashbacks that it is done because of who trained him. He was built up from the ground by some master, from what he stated, to be a king. He is meant to be king. This is the mentality that Jamil has been born with and has been ingrained into him. He was taught swordplay, royal swordplay, but Alibaba managed to vest him at every point because it was actual combat, and Alibaba seems to know actual combat and has mastered his techniques and even this ancient language of Tron. Which, again, subtle world building is something that I very like in any type of series, and I feel like this ancient language is going to come into play even more as we go to more dungeons. But this whole contrast between Jamil and Alibaba is to show which one of them has more qualities to be a king, as what we see when the dungeon is conquered is that the whole point of a dungeon is that when a Magi, a character that is known as a sorcerer of creation, is essentially someone that guides a king's candidate, someone who's supposed to be a king, to these dungeons so that they can claim a djinn in a metal vessel, so that they can start their own kingdom, and so that these candidates could eventually be whittled down to one to essentially be the ruler of the world, where the entire world will be backed by them and will turn towards this king. But I like that this is the idea behind the dungeons, as the idea of dungeons in any type of series, it just feels like a type of video game quest type deal, and I'm honestly just glad it's not that. And the idea of people trying to enter these dungeons to claim the powers of djinns is something I'm honestly kind of curious to see it, because from what we've seen with Aladdin, his golden flute has a mark on it that's the same as the mark in the what is known as the treasure room that houses the djinn Ammon. And we all know that Ugo is a djinn and belongs to Aladdin. And when we see at the end of this arc, we see some very interesting moments. But when Ammon is sending Aladdin, Alibaba, and Morgiana back to their world, Ammon seems to turn into a more ethereal form and go into Alibaba's knife, leaving the same mark on it, meaning that Alibaba has Ammon as a djinn. Now, how he's going to gain and use the powers of Ammon is honestly something I have no idea how it's going to go, but I'm very excited to find out. Now, the conclusion of this arc was honestly something I did not expect, and I was very happy with, as we see this guy with long hair with someone else in a mask, what seems to be on a flying carpet as well. Apparently they were trying to force close the dungeon that Aladdin and the others were in. And I'm not sure why they would do this, but it could have something to do with Aladdin. There was a lot of mystery surrounding Aladdin as a character, where he came from, how strong and powerful he is, as he's demonstrated on his own without Ugo. With that staff he found, he was able to use some type of bird-like energy to use magic, from what it seems like. And that he was deemed as a Magi by Jamil. And Aladdin doesn't even know what a Magi is until Ammon explained it to us as someone that everyone turns to and is a sorcerer of creation. I want to know more about what a Magi is, and honestly what's going to happen next to the story. Because once the dungeon is cleared and everyone returns to where they are, Aladdin seems to be the only one who's missing. And within a couple of weeks, Alibaba, after being known to be the one to clear the dungeon, essentially becomes the new ruler of the town that he's in. Morgiana is free and she's working for wages so she can earn a living, so she can eventually go back to what is known as the Continent of Darkness, or the Dark Continent, Hunter x Hunter reference, or a dark continent, so that she can find her way home, as she barely has any memories of her home, but she kind of has faint memories of what it looks like, and she wants to go there, find her people, potentially be truly free. And after this talk with Alibaba, Alibaba ends up leaving town, leaving messages for everyone to tell Aladdin if he were ever to show up, as we get a brief instance at the very end of this arc showing Aladdin in a field somewhere being discovered by people on horseback. The dungeon arc is honestly something that I did not expect to like as much as I did, because usually opening arcs aren't super amazing and have too much world building, but the fact that we have multiple dungeons out in the world, the jinns, the metal vessels, the mystery of Aladdin, what exactly is a Magi, I am so invested in the story at this point, and I am very excited to see what happens next. Aladdin is somewhere off that isn't a desert, so I presume he's like incredibly far away. Morgiana is doing her own thing so she could essentially find her way back home, and Alibaba is going off to take care of some business. Perhaps it has something to do with Baobab that he mentioned earlier, and I'm very excited. The next arc is the Ko arc, from what I think it is, and as well as the Morgiana arc. So I will most likely cover those two next video, as those basically center around 2 volumes each. So yeah, look forward to that video in the future. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell down below. And if you want to see the future blind reviews early, don't forget to check out my Patreon. It's going to be available for all patrons a day or 2 early. And I honestly can't wait to talk about this story even more. So don't forget to check out my Instagram and Twitter account, as every once in a while I will give you guys updates on what parts of the story I'm at, just to give my initial thoughts on it. And with all that said and done, I hope you enjoyed this video. Look forward to next time, and I hope you all have an awesome day.